Welcome everybody. It looks like people are trickling in. We'll just start our hellos and then acknowledgement and welcome folks as they journey in. I feel like we will be receiving a few more. It's great to have you this morning. We are delighted to have Harshan and Dwayne here with us to present on guidelines for climate resilience. I'll just kick us off with a brief land acknowledgement. I'm coming to you from the unceded, never surrendered territories of the Squamish Nation on the south coast of BC. The village name is Chequelp, and I am practicing learning of how to pronounce it. I have been able to make the acquaintance of a of a neighbor of someone locally that speaks the language. So it's really wonderful to start to continue my learning journey in this space. I'm grateful for the clean air and the fresh waters that we have here that has been stewarded very well since time immemorial. I welcome you to put your name and affiliation and maybe where you're coming from into the chat, and we'll remind folks as they come in to do the same. And we will get going because we want to make sure to have lots of time to interact with Dwayne and Harshan. It's really wonderful to have them with us to explore how climate resilience is being advanced through codes and standards, guidelines and advisories in their two respective organizations. Dwayne Torrey is from Canadian Standards Association, and Harshan Radhakrishnan is from Engineers and Geoscientists BC. So we'll start with Dwayne's presentation and then Harshan's. Approximately it'd be like 30 to 40 minutes of presentation, and then we'll have time for question answer. If the discussion wants to continue afterwards, we can always book another one and continue, or take your questions back and get back to you if the time feels short at the end. So I'll start with Dwayne's introduction and welcome him to present for us shortly after. Dwayne Torrey is a director of construction and infrastructure sorry, my voice. Dwayne, and maybe I will just, before I get into that, I'll say that Nilufar is recording our session so that we can share it with others who may not be able to join today. We know that there are a few from the collaborative who weren't able to join here today. So with that, and I'll reset the introduction for Dwayne. Sorry about that. Dwayne Torrey is the Director of Construction and Infrastructure Standards at Canadian Standards Association, CSA, which is a global organization dedicated to safety, social good, and sustainability. The mission of CSA is to enhance the lives of Canadians through the advancement of standards in the public and private sectors. In his role, Dwayne is responsible for helping define the strategic path for over 250 standards and codes that help to enhance safety and reliability of structures, construction materials, products, systems, and mechanical safety equipment. Through continuous assessment of emerging construction trends, Dwayne and his team have advanced critical issues such as modular buildings, building information modeling, climate resilience, circular construction, and decarbonization of materials. It's a delight to have you with us. Thank you for sharing your time. You're welcome to share your screen if that works for you, and start off with your presentation. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, and hopefully the screen is popping up for you okay as we speak here. Is everything okay with it? Or am I sharing the wrong screen right now?
No, you're good. We see your presenter view, and it's coming through clear, and your voice as well. So please go ahead.
Excellent. It jumped over to a screen of my wallpaper of my children on the third screen, and I hope that that's not what you were looking at right now. So excellent. It's really great to meet everybody today. Excited to get a chance to comment and speak to you about some of the work that we've been doing at Canadian Standards Association. It's more and more the conversation is growing for us. Each time we go out and we talk to a community, a municipality, it seems like the challenges are continuously sort of snowballing. And so we've been working fairly hard for the last 15 years plus to try to figure out some of the solutions to the challenges that different communities are experiencing. And today I want to hopefully go through a little bit of some of the solutions that may be there for the Coastal Climate Resilience Collaborative to consider. So the deck that I'm going to present today, I will provide post meeting, so you can all have it. It's got some access to QR codes and links to lots of resources that hopefully will be useful to you. So, so first off, what again, you're looking at a picture of a socket. Is that correct? Okay, excellent, good. It's funny because I use Teams and it draws this nice red box around everything, and I'm seeing no box, and I was getting worried there for a second. But basically, in daily life, standards are essentially they're invisible. People don't really know that they exist, but at home, at work, and in the community, they shape pretty much everything we do. They make sure that you don't have to worry about the bridge your family drives over on the family vacation, the office you work in, or even the safety of your family at home while you're sleeping. And they're really critical documents because they ensure that consistency in how things are done, and they also provide the confidence for those who are pointing to them, whether it be regulation or voluntarily, to make sure that they're actually doing what they need to do. So we develop standards with the help of expert volunteers, and those expert volunteers help come together, create the content that we put into the standard. And really what it is, it's the best knowledge available and out there. And at CSA, we have over 11,000 people who volunteer their time to technical experts to develop these standards. And their contributions are really, really important because really they are the people who understand the problems and they understand the best available solutions for things. So CSA, we are not the experts. We're expert facilitators. We bring the people together to talk about what needs to be done. And organizationally, we're a not-for-profit. So we don't have shareholders. Nobody owns CSA, but we're not government either. Our members are the ones who run the organization. And we've been around since 1919. The very first standard we published was on steel railway bridges because they were collapsing, and it identified the need for codes and standards. So that standard number one has grown to over 3,000 standards being used, across Canada and beyond now. And the thing about standards is that they are evergreen. We'll develop a standard for something, and although the information may be sort of in its infancy, when we get more information, we go back, we open up a standard, and we make sure that we enhance it even more so that each time we look at it, we make sure that it is keeping up with technology, that it is putting the best information available out there for people to use. So those are the fundamentals of standards. Organizationally, what do? We develop standards, yes, and we also do a number of other things. Most people will recognize CSA from the little logo you see on a hockey helmet or work boots, or even sort of the plumbing fixtures at home, and that is the side of the organization that makes sure things work well. But on the orange side, the left-hand side of the screen, is where I work. We develop the standards. We do research to understand what we need standards for and what's the problem in an area. And we also try to do capacity building because I'm finding more and more. I've been here a lot of years, and the bigger issue is the understanding of and the application of the standards that are out there. So we're working hard to start to get the education built because as you have, let's say, a generation of building officials retiring, you have a new generation of young people coming out of university expected to understand how to do all of this stuff that used to be a journey person who spent a career getting to know it and then applying that knowledge, and now they don't have that chance. So education is so critical nowadays. And to support that, we also have, a public policy team who essentially open the can of worms. They look at things like, so we want more housing, but we want less carbon. How do you actually make the two of those things happen at the same time? And there are solutions to those things, but they're very complex things, which take some complex thinking. Just a really quick note on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So, they're, you know, some people will know about them, some people this will be new to, but they're basically a universal call to action to help end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that people are hopefully enjoying peace and lack of poverty and prosperity by 2030. You have very aspirational goals, but what it is trying to create some metrics so we can measure ourselves to see how we're doing. And so at CSA, we've measured over 1,100 standards to the UN SDGs to see, how we rate, how we map. And we find that in many cases, we are sort of checking the boxes. We are doing the right things with our members to try to help things, including climate resilience. And climate resilience is where I want to focus our time here this morning. There's a QR code up in the corner of the screen here, and this is going to take you to a space on the CSA website, which points you to a lot of the critical issues that we're trying to tackle right now. So again, you can pull your phone out now, or you can wait for the presentation afterwards. But it identifies a number of things that we're trying to tackle: decarbonization and hydrogen economy, and all of these various things. But four things that are probably of interest to the group on the call today are climate resilience and northern infrastructure, because they do go hand in hand. Circular economy and modular construction. They're all things that are really top of mind for communities across Canada. And so for today, I can't jump into all of those in a short amount of time, but I'm going to try to tackle the resiliency end of things that we're looking at. So for climate resilience, it is definitely a space that we've been working really hard on for the last while. Our building envelopes are struggling to resist the extreme weather, high winds, the hail, and all of these various attributes. Our sewers are straining against the increased flooding and rain loads, and wastewater treatment plants, bridges, dams. They're all trying to do things they were never designed to do. So we've been spending a lot of time diving back into the existing standards and figuring out how can we actually try to create real solutions to help people out, who are struggling with things such as community flooding. So there's three different areas that I'm going to quickly look at. And Inez, what is my time check? When would you like me to be complete by, just so I don't talk too quickly?
Yeah, it's up to you. But how about you take another 10 minutes and then we'll see how it goes.
Beautiful. Sounds
Yes.
good. So management systems essentially provide the guidelines and the frameworks to make sure that organizations can implement things effectively. And in the area of management systems, there's three key areas that we're looking at when it comes to resilience. The first is asset management. Second is risk management, and the third is greenhouse gas measurement. And they each play a really important role in sort of helping to guide towards the solutions in these areas. And so, when you dive into something like asset management, it then starts to pull in other things. You have digital twins, you have building information modeling. You're trying to integrate the natural and the built spaces as well. So it's all very integrated and important things. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that we map out how all of these things work together. When you dive into water and flood resilience, I think this is probably the area that we want to spend most of our conversation on here. So water and flood resilience is a critical topic as we begin to face the extreme climate challenges. So we understand the importance of developing strategies to manage water resources effectively and to mitigate flood risks. So by focusing on resilience, we can ensure that communities are better prepared for the extreme weather events. So it's essential to consider both the infrastructure improvements and the natural solutions, such as restoring wetlands and forests. So to all the effort to improve our overall resilience. So as we move forward, it's going to be important to have a lot of collaboration amongst the impacted parties. So in this area, there has been a ton of work that's happened in the last short few years because it has been such a critical issue. You know, the development of the new specifications, particularly for northern communities, is crucial for these areas that face unique challenges. Standards listed, such as those for community drainage planning and erosion management, are designed to enhance resilience against flooding. Additionally, the focus on flood resilient design for new residential communities and prioritization of flood risk in existing areas underscores a proactive approach to infrastructure planning. And advanced techniques like airborne LiDAR for flood mapping illustrates the integration of technology in managing flood risks. So overall, these standards aim to create a comprehensive framework for improving flood resilience across various sectors, ensuring communities are better prepared for climate-related challenges. So this slide focuses on the critical areas for water and flood resilience. It's emphasizing the integration and impact of various strategies. So CSA has developed resources specifically aimed at assisting municipalities in enhancing their flood resilience. The Water Guide, which is free for all communities, highlights key CSA standards related to stormwater management, bioretention systems, and erosion control. And the Water Guide is essential for creating effective policies and planning documents, and it provides examples of bylaw and policy wording that can be easily adapted for use in development and emergency preparedness plans as well. So the practical approach not only streamlines the process for municipalities, but also ensures that they're equipped with the necessary tools to address water-related challenges effectively. So on the following page, you'll see again a QR code down here that you're going to want to capture because the effective integration is crucial for maximizing the potential of our systems and the processes. It allows for seamless communication between different components, enhancing efficiency and reducing the risk of errors. So by focusing on effective integration, we can ensure that our teams are aligned and that information flows smoothly across the departments. And this not only improves productivity, but also fosters innovation as teams can collaborate more effectively. So as we move forward, we want to consider the tools and strategies we can implement to enhance the integration efforts and ensure that we're well positioned to meet our goals. So moving on to the next area, which is infrastructure. So somebody was trying to call me on a different line there. So we have infrastructure, which plays a really critical role in our resilience planning. We have been doing again a fair bit of work to try to figure out what to do to deal with this really big situation that we have going on. So, it's crucial to recognize that the costs associated with adapting infrastructure to future climate conditions are minimal compared to the potential expenses of repairs or rebuilding after the damage occurs. And the World Bank calculated that resilience investments can lead to significant savings, potentially avoiding up to 75% of the costs over a 20-year period. So we have to consider future climate in the work that we're doing. So we've made a lot of advancements in a lot of areas related to infrastructure and building design, specifically in challenging environments like the North again. And we've developed special solutions for permafrost conditions, things such as thermosite foundations and strategies for managing snow loads and high winds. We've put focus on fire resilience and asset management to make sure that we have safe and sustainable communities. And the codes and standards that we've developed in this area, they're sort of reflecting the efforts we're trying to do to hit everything from the large assets right down to the small aspects as well. We have things such as the backflow preventers and resilient fenestration to try to help tackle sort of the impacts down at a building level, all the way up to dams and bridges as well. So there's a lot to tackle, but we have a really, really great group of experts who are trying to help us to create those solutions. The last one I want to touch on is for the health and safety area. So health and safety of individuals, of communities, is really critical. And we've been really committed to trying to figure out what it is we need to do in the face of climate change to build resilience into health and safety and healthcare facilities. So we've been diving into this area and looking at what we need to do. We've been putting a lot of focus on healthcare facilities in the north, healthcare facilities in the face of climate resilience, and doing a lot of engagement. So, we've been doing research in this area to identify what the service needs are in the north, for example. We've been doing workshops to try to identify how do you build adaptive healthcare systems, especially in remote communities. And we've been going through the entire portfolio of CSA standards in this space to try to figure out what can we do to integrate more resilience into the healthcare and the health and safety standards that we have. So it has been a significant journey, I guess you could say, to try to get to all the possible solutions that we have. And here's just finally some of the things that we've been doing when it comes to the healthcare facilities. We have actually a new technical committee at CSA that are specifically charged with looking at environmentally resilient healthcare facilities. And again, unpacking everything here to sort of look at what is the next thing that we need to do, and then diving right into that work. As well, capacity building is to try to upskill and educate everybody who is in this space so that they understand, what it is, the tools that they have at hand and how to better use them. So I hope that I didn't talk too long. I had a lot to cover, and I do apologize for that, Inez. But that's it in a nutshell. And glad to stop now and answer questions or leave them till later.
Thank you so much, Dwayne. No, you are right on time with even 1 minute to still keep going. So thank you so much for sharing from that kind of in-depth overview of the extensive efforts that CSA is doing to address climate resilience and codes and standards. I think this is great for the Pacific Regional Collaborative to be aware of, the local authorities to have access to these resources. So I really appreciate it. I think we will hold questions till the end. So I'll do an introduction for Harshan and invite him to prepare for sharing screen for his presentation. So next up, we have Harshan Radhakrishnan, who is a manager of climate change and sustainability initiatives at Engineers and Geoscientists BC. He has considerable experience in infrastructure and climate resilience, regulation of engineering and geoscience professions, professional development, policy development, and sustainability. At Engineers and Geoscientists BC, Harshan has helped spearhead the development of their first ever climate change action plan, which integrates the consideration of climate change into its strategic plan for the organization and mainstream climate risk management practices into various engineering and geoscientists practice guidelines. So we're looking forward to hear on that work from you now, Harshan, and thank you. I can see your screen. It's on presenter view. The floor is yours.
Great. Thanks a lot, Inas. And yeah, before I jump into my presentation, I have just wanted to note that I've had the opportunity to contribute to some of CSA's standards development process. And I'll just say that if you want to get a diverse perspective, learn about, because these are pan-Canadian standards and sometimes it's, even binational standards. See the different perspectives and understand how these national standards are developed is pretty much very, very interesting, and I'd highly recommend that. So with that, I'll just, start by saying thank you for this opportunity, and I'm glad to join you from the traditional, ancestral, and ceded territories of the Katsi, Semiahmoo, and Kwantlen First Nations. And I'm happy to provide a brief overview of the professional practice resources that EGBC has developed in relation to climate change adaptation. So for folks who do not know a little bit about EGBC, is that we are a professional regulatory body established under the Professional Governance Act, and we have the mandate to protect the public interest respecting the practice of the professions. And we also have this overarching, responsibility to enhance the ability of our registrants to respond to changes in practice environments, advances in technology, and other emerging issues. And I don't think I have to sell it to this audience that, climate change and the need for adaptation, is an imperative. It's causing all kinds of changes to our practice environments, and, it requires EGBC to take proactive action. Our registrants, on the other hand, they have the responsibility to hold paramount public health and safety and to protect the environment. And beyond that, they have to have regard for the applicable standards, policies, plans, practices established by the government or engineers and geoscientists BC. And that's where it intersects with our mandate to establish, monitor, and enforce standards for professional practice. I'll expand on that a little bit further. But as Ainas referred to, we were one of the first regulatory bodies to develop a comprehensive climate change action plan for our registrants. And in terms of preparing for that, we carried out wide-ranging consultation, including various sectors, various industries and areas of practice, and we were able to better understand how we can position ourselves to support our registrants in responding to climate change. The information in this report, it's publicly available. It definitely was helpful in preparing EGBC's climate change action plan. The report demonstrate that pretty much almost all areas and industries of practice have specific impacts and challenges in relation to climate change. And we heard lots of concerns. Some of these I just put it on the screen. Our registrants wanted better support for being able to account for uncertainty. Uh, they were unsure about the reliability of the climate related information that they were getting, and they were looking for support from engineers and geoscientists PC and pretty much all the professional networks and societies that they rely on. So based on the concerns gathered from this report, Engineers and Geoscientists BC, has actually developed an action under its climate change action plan to provide registrants with practical and relevant resources to help them deliver appropriate responses to climate change, including GHG mitigation opportunities. Of course, this presentation is predominantly focused on practice guidelines and practice advisories related to climate change adaptation, but suffice it to say that we have a wide range of resources relating to GHG mitigation as well. So that's a little bit of a context. The other thing that I would like to know, to kind of share, is that these professional practice guidelines, they are one of the, it's sort of like the de facto regulatory instrument of Engineers and Geoscientists BC. We develop these practice guidelines with a risk-based analysis. They're sometimes, developed in response to demand-side legislation. But we carry out, typically, if we carry out a risk-based analysis, we pair it with a prioritization exercise to address, practice activities involving increased risk to public safety or environment. And pretty much like the CSA, these guidelines are written by subject matter experts, and they are kind of refined through review and consultation. I know CSA does a public review, but ours is much more targeted to our registrants. And then, they're submitted to the EGBC's board for approval before publishing. And essentially, We administer these guidelines, and there's compliance aspects related to the bylaws. Registrants are expected to have regard for these guidelines, be knowledgeable about the guidelines if it relates to their area of practice. And if a registrant is departing from the duties and obligations expressed in these guidelines, they must document the reasons for departing from any relevant portion of the practice guideline. So that is the context that I can provide. So it's not sort of like a nice to have. Registrants do have to meet the intent of the professional practice guidelines that apply to their practice. So now I'm going to jump to provide sort of like a snapshot of the various kinds of practice guidelines that we have. I've particularly chosen only those that directly deal with climate change adaptation. So what I mean by that is every time we develop a practice resource or update one, we apply a climate lens to that. But there are certain guidelines that directly deal with climate change adaptation, and those are the ones that I'm highlighting for you today. So the first one, it's called as developing climate change resilient designs for highway infrastructure in BC, and it's developed in response to BC Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure's technical circular, which requires engineers and geoscientists BC's registrants to have reasonable consideration of climate change and extreme weather events appropriate to the scale of the project. And their chief engineer, they want a report to be prepared that explains how climate change factors have been considered in design. So with that kind of a directive, we had to respond with what the suggested standard of practice could potentially look like. And so we worked with, the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies, BC MOTI's engineers, and a wide range of subject matter experts, including our climate change advisory group, to come up with what that standard of practice looks like. And some of the things that has gone into the professional practice guidelines, as it's kind of expressed on the screen, but it essentially kind of says that you need to be working with your owner. In this case, it's BC Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure, to kind of define what the climate risk tolerance is. It's based on the time horizon, the criticality of the infrastructure, whether it's sort of like a remote road crossing that is only seasonally used, or is it a major arterial road. So it's based on those kinds of things. The risk tolerance is defined. And this is one of the first documents that I'm aware of that actually required professionals to use future projected climate information, to help inform design decisions. And one of the things that BCMOTI, kept reiterating was that the codes and standards themselves are fine. The intent of the codes and standards is what matters. The information, the climate related information in the codes and standards, it's outdated. So what you need to be doing is use future projected climate information and substitute for the climate data within the identified time horizon. And not only that, you need to be determining what are the appropriate adaptation options and actually revisiting them with the infrastructure owner to be able to kind of propose what the kind of adaptation solutions are. And finally, not only that, you need to be able to complete the design criteria sheet for climate change resilience, stamp and seal it, and kind of provide your professional assurance. So that's one. Here's another one. This is a practice advisory, and I have to note the difference between professional practice guidelines and a practice advisory. A practice advisory is not a de facto regulatory instrument. It does not establish the duties and obligations of professional practice. It's more of providing a heads up about an environmental issue, about a future regulatory issue that may be of interest to registrants, or they have to respond to it, or upcoming code changes in the horizon. So essentially, this advisory was developed in response to the CSA's report on climate change adaptation solutions within the framework of the Canadian Electrical Code. So many authorities having jurisdiction, they've already established flood construction levels within, with restricted use to allow construction to proceed in flood-prone areas. And so what we have determined is that, FCLs have the capacity to change over time. And so, we needed to make sure that, if um, buildings are built near to flood-prone areas, then we need to be paying attention to what are the electrical engineering considerations. Some of these things include how electrical equipment could be accessible for disconnection. What are the situations where it's deemed appropriate for electrical equipment to be in areas susceptible to flooding? And what do you do to make sure that you're making egress features, emergency lighting, fire alarm systems operational before, during, and after a flood? And what are the flood proofing considerations for, if you need to flood proof it, if it's suitable for submerged installation, what are the considerations? And if there are any flood resilient design features that are in conflict with the BC building code, how should you actually bring it forward to the design team? So those are some of the aspects that's covered in this advisory. The next one is the set of professional practice guidelines. You see the word legislated in that. What that means is these guidelines respond to a legislated requirement. In this case, it was developed to promote consistency and incorporate flood risk management, climate change, adaptation considerations in relation to the flood hazard area land use management guidelines established by the province of BC. So it goes into, it's a highly sophisticated, professional practice guidelines that is relevant only for folks that are sort of relied upon or called upon as subject matter experts to do flood assessment. So it talks about what the standard of practice is. How should you rely on LiDAR images? How should you carry out, how should you determine regional flood frequency curves? How do you get the intensity, duration, frequency curves? And how do you actually carry this out in larger areas? And it also gives some guidance when you're not able to determine a statistically significant trend, or if it's a small drainage basin, how would you account for it if you're not able to kind of determine the future projected climate information for the life of the project? So it gave a guidance that sort of um, create an upward adjustment of 20% to the flows to account for future local conditions when reliable information is not available. And oftentimes we hear that this is what some of the local governments actually suggest using when they are not able to carry out detailed assessments. Certainly, that wasn't the intent for this suggestion to become mainstream, but unfortunately, that's kind of what has transpired. And then it also talks about, how do you deal with uncertainty in future projected climate information? What are the limitations and assumptions that, that professionals typically make, and how should it be communicated and recorded to establish when an asset, how do you communicate when an assessment is no longer valid, or when is another assessment required? So all of that information is captured here. And this practice advisory relates to all building enclosure engineers. And I would suggest that, it's a mature area of practice with, certainly more than 2,000, building scientists practicing in this area. And it talks about things like, how do you manage thermal comfort? What are the indoor air quality concerns? How do you make sure that you look at enclosure combustibility in light of increased wildfire risk? How do you account for wind and changes in precipitation patterns? And how do you actually deal with sea level rise? So with precipitation, let's just take that for an example. You need to be looking at overflow drains, roof systems, but also look at sea level rise with how do we account for flooding below grade or at grade? So it goes into a lot of detail for building enclosure engineers. The one thing I'll note is a lot of those considerations have actually been written into their professional practice guidelines. And this one, we have more than 2,800 EGBCs registrants that work in the water sector. And we all know that water sector has cross-cutting impacts from climate change. And if we look at industry associations, the American Water Works Association, its Canadian counterpart, research institutions, academia, they're all navigating towards adopting an integrated approach to water management. So what we have done is we have developed an interim set of professional practice guidelines. In this case, we wanted to advance this practice even though there was no governing legislation requiring registered professionals to consider an integrated water management approach. Essentially, the approach requires registrants to consider watershed, drinking water, wastewater, storm drainage, and water reuse systems as a single resource. And it seeks to present a holistic approach to governance, operation, and financing. And it does so by responding to a fundamental need for a collaborative, risk-informed approach to water management issues. And so that's a lot of considerations that I've just packed into a single sentence there. But essentially, what it seeks to do is take the integrated water management approach and marry it with a risk assessment approach, so that our efforts to kind of carry out One Water initiative serves to reduce systemic risks. So that is something that we have recently done as well. And this is an advisory that we issued that was specifically focused on overheating considerations. And we did this in response to the BC heat dome, where you might know that unfortunately more than 600 people lost their lives. So it goes into a lot of detail, and we picked the multi-unit residential buildings in particular because we knew that that's where people a lot of the risk is focused on that segment of the built environment. And so, we discussed what are the factors that are contributing to overheating. It's the direct solar heat gain, heat island effects, internal heat gain, inadequate ventilation. So how do you actually address that? It's through passive cooling. It's through reducing energy demand for active cooling. So we needed to consider our efforts to deal with climate change adaptation should not exacerbate energy poverty, peak demand. So we need to bring that lens, and we need to be understanding how we can leverage shading, both natural as well as shading for using overhangs or perhaps even low E coating. So what are the fenestration and facade based approaches, and how can we leverage active cooling? And while we all understand heat pumps are an excellent climate change adaptation and mitigation solution, perhaps in certain cases installation of individual air conditioning units or sometimes paired with high efficiency heat recovery ventilators, especially when there's a cost concern, that could actually work very well. And we needed to understand, how can we actually propose this in a manner that minimizes disruption to occupants with respect to all the updates and retrofits that's taking place. And so that is a resource that is available, and we've got some complementary resources on our climate change information portal as well on the same topic. And so that's a little bit of a snapshot. Hopefully, I've not overwhelmed you folks, but I just wanted to provide a brief overview of the kinds of resources. Certainly, this is not the full spectrum, or it's not a complete cross section of our resources. But I just in the limited amount of time, I just wanted to provide a flavor for what these resources look like. So looking ahead, Engineers and Geoscientists BC, it recognizes the need for our responsibility to act within the climate space as a body mandated to protect the public interest and public safety. We recognize both the acute and chronic long-term risk that climate change poses. As such, we have an ongoing active role in this space. From the policy perspective, we have, like I mentioned, we have a policy to apply a climate and equity lens to the development of every professional practice resource. And so that is something that we will continue to do. And we need to be able to promote the practice guidelines that we have developed. So I told about the fact that the One Water guidelines, they are interim set of practice guidelines. So we need to be, we have already engaged the water sector, and we'll continue to engage with the water sector to promote the use of these professional practice guidelines. One of the other things that we are doing is we are working with NRCan to set up a training program for building sector professionals on how do you actually focus on climate change adaptation for existing buildings and new buildings in the Part 3 space, that is greater than 3 stories and greater than 600 square meters. And so we are pairing that effort with the development of a set of professional practice guidelines on climate resilience retrofits. Of course, we have professional practice guidelines focused on asset management, and we have a companion guide focused on natural asset management considerations for the engineering and geoscience professional. And so we continue to explore opportunities on providing continuing education on these topics, nature-based climate solutions. We've already offered some CEs in that regard, and we are working with, I know that a lot of local governments are focused on advancing this, and so we are like collaborating with them in terms of offering CEs. And we offered a regulatory learning module that is specifically focused on climate and sustainability. And so what we're going to do into the future is perhaps look at offering a climate-centric regulatory learning module once every 4 years, or alternatively, apply a climate and equity lens to the development of each regulatory learning module going into the future. And finally, I just want to leave you folks with an ongoing commitment of Engineers and Geoscientists BC that we will continue to monitor the climate science, policy, and technology landscape in order to be able to position us to be able to better deliver on our mandate and to support our registrants. So hopefully this has been sort of a useful presentation, and hopefully we can take some questions now, but I'll maybe stop.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Harshan. That was a great overview and highlighting of the EGBC's practice advisories and professional practice guidelines related to climate adaptation and resilience. And yeah, really just grateful for your presence. You've really been a champion in the province for us to uplift climate action and sustainability in the profession. I really appreciate it. I appreciate both of you, Dwayne and Harshan, for extending your time to be with us in this hour. We have 10 minutes or so for questions, so I'll open the floor. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, everybody. We have a pretty small group also. Feel free to just come off mute and share your questions vocally. And if questions come up to you after the fact, just feel free to send it along. And I'm grateful for the relationship we have with EGBC and CSA, and can kind of continue correspondence if things come up in the future.
Maybe just to kick things off, I'll ask a quick one to Dwayne. So I saw in your slide about advocacy role that CSA plays. Could you touch on, what does that look like in terms of advancing climate change adaptation through standards development?
Yeah, so our advocacy role has a few components to it. One of the key things that we do, Harshan, is we have a government relations team, and so we have people across the country, BC, Alberta, handling Parliament Hill in Ottawa, handling Eastern Canada, and what they work to do is to get in front of the policymakers, the decision makers, to promote the importance of advancing, climate resilience, ensuring we're talking climate change and not other terminology, which kind of ignores what's really happening. So the government relations team is one key component of it. We have got a fairly large marketing capability now. And when I say marketing, I mean getting the message out, getting the collateral up on websites, out there on social media, to keep reinforcing the message. and then finally with advocacy is the capacity building. So kind of getting the word out on the education that we have, trying to get the materials that we're doing into curriculum, speaking with universities, getting it into that next generation of engineers and others. So it's we have quite a team here, and they just wait for us to provide them the message we want them to communicate and who we need them to talk to. So if there ever is a situation, Harshan, where you need to sort of get a message out on resilience, on the importance of standards, or sort of driving initiative forward, you talk to me, and then I will talk to the people here who can help with that. Oh, you're on mute.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry. I think that there is a question in the chat from Marina.
Yeah, I think that is relevant to me. Retrofit standards for existing homes. I don't know, Dwayne, you feel free to expand on that as well, but I can just provide the BC perspective here. So a couple of things. The climate resiliency training program that we are developing, targets new and existing buildings. I know that folks in the BC government, they're doing some work to develop the climate resiliency framework and standards for public sector buildings. I think I better let Dave talk about it because he represents public sector. I think he'll be able to much better answer that.
Yeah, hopefully I can give somewhat of an answer. I mean, the quick answer is no. There are not yet any, there's nothing that's mandatory. There are definitely standards and guidelines, or there's a standards framework for public sector organizations to use now to build resiliency into their buildings and infrastructure. I'll be blunt about it. I mean, Treasury Board initially started that being a mandatory process, and it's been a bit watered down, unfortunately. But there is still a level of basic risk assessment that must be done for those types of projects.
That's great. Yeah. The only thing I will add is that there are numerous guidelines in this space that relates to the health facilities. I think Dwayne also touched on this fact that CSA is developing standards in this space. EGBC, we are developing a set of professional practice guidelines for climate resilience retrofits. We have just started that. It's going to take at least a year or so before those guidelines are published. But yeah, we are doing all kinds of communications about it just to raise the importance of this. Dwayne, I feel like you may want to add as well.
Yeah, and I wish I had the silver bullet there on that that question too. Is there a retrofit standard or a retrofit code? And I don't believe there is any perfect tool right now. It is a matter of when you are going to do the retrofit. There are a number of great new standards and tools that can be applied. There's sort of the bar is raising for it, but not one specific solution to help get you there at the moment.
Dave, do you have a question?
Actually, yes, I do.
Please go ahead.
It's kind of for both Dwayne and Harshan. First off, thanks. This is really informative. So great presentations. I'm always curious about kind of touching on that previous question in some ways. What is mandatory versus actual guidelines? And as we've talked about the stuff here today, we have the BC Building Code, for example. Obviously, it's mandatory. That's what this that's what has to be done. Harshan, you talked about that difference between professional practice guidelines and practice advisories. And my understanding is, and just correct me if I'm wrong, is that those practice guidelines, I liked what I saw on that slide that it must be defended if you don't use them. Yep. So I just wanted to confirm that's the way that is.
That is correct.
And then similarly for the CSA standards, Dwayne, again, these are standards, which I'm assuming, I mean, I know they've been used to go into things like the building code,
yeah.
but and there's a whole bunch of different types of documents that are out there now. Again, I want to confirm those aren't, I mean, they're not mandatory is what I'm asking. These are guidelines that we take into consideration when we're building these other, let's say policies or things like the building code for amendments and stuff.
Yeah, it's a really it's a great question. So standards by their nature are not mandatory. I mean, they're published as voluntary documents. So whether it be a standard, a guideline, they all come out as voluntary documents. So use as you wish. Now, once it gets pointed to by a code, by a regulation, and otherwise, then it becomes mandatory. So we don't have the power to implement, I guess you would say, at CSA. We create them and then hope that they get used. So they become mandatory once they're referenced. There is a lot of voluntary standards that get used out there. So they aren't mandatory, but they are the best practice available. So it goes to sort of that if you have to defend that you made all the right decisions, and there is a standard sitting there that was there that you could have referred to and you chose to ignore it, it would, and Harshan, this is more your territory, but if you have something that is the evidence that you could be turning to, whether it's mandatory or not, it's sort of a duty, I guess, a duty of care, I guess, to use a term, that you should be looking at that regardless of whether it's officially pointed to in a regulation. But there are so many important tools out there that could and should be used. Challenge with regulations is they take years and years to actually pull something in. Even when we have a standard reference by the National Building Code, we can be 10, 15 years getting something new into it just because of how difficult it is to really kind of get through that whole process, right? So that's where you rely on people saying, yes, I know it's not mandatory, but this is the best way to do it, and I'm going to choose to do it that way.
Yeah. The one thing that I would add is with these practice guidelines also, it's not like you shall follow it in every case. In certain instances, if you are required to carry out this activity, these practice guidelines need to be followed. So there's qualifiers that become applicable. The practice advisories tend to kind of talk about the state of play in a little bit more of a exploratory detail, but the practice guidelines may only require a higher level climate change consideration. It may not, sort of include as a de facto standard of professional practice the whole 9 yards. And so we need to manage expectations in terms of changing practice environments, what the industry de facto standard of practice is, and we need to be able to offer them a different range of practice tools. Practice guidelines are one, practice advisories are another one, information bulletins, and some are just practice resources, things that you kind of refer to. We can't establish everything as a practice standard, then we cannot cause non-compliance issues. We need to be cognizant of that as well.
Thank you so much. And we have just 1 minute left now. So Ruth, I'll invite you to ask your question, but we do need to actually truncate right at 11 because another colleague is trying to use the Zoom room. So please ask your question, and then we might need to follow up with an answer.
Sure. Thanks for letting me ask the question. My question is about if there's, and forgive my ignorance if this was covered, but if there's guidance on like which climate projections data and like how to interpret it, because there's different sources and different indicators that can all speak to the same hazard and things like that. So I was curious about that. But then also within the guidelines, because they're divided by hazard, I was curious if there's any exploration of trade-offs when it comes to like some things like, more trees around your house, better shading for heat, but then more risk for wildfire. So like just curious about if that's ever covered or explored, because there can be these cascading factors or trade-offs when it comes to making these decisions for municipalities.
Thank you so much. We do need to hop off. Harshan, maybe if you want to, I'll share.
Email response.
Yeah, I'll share Ruth's contact for a response. And Dwayne, if you would like to add to it as well, I can. But thank you so much. Much appreciated. Great conversation. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Oh,
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.